an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Season 4, Episode 6, I See You. In this episode, everybody has shit to do and places to be, and they all wind up having to go to those places and do their things with people they don't want to be going there and doing those things with. That makes sense? Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Megan for commissioning this episode. Guys, I just cannot believe how close I am to the end of this show. I mean, what are there? Like 4 episodes left? Is there even? I'm just realizing that I don't even know. Let me check. I won't spoil myself. I'm commissioned up until episode 8. And there are 9 and 10. There's 2 more after that have not yet been commissioned. Wow. 5 and then it's over. I am not ready. I'll be honest with you guys. This show has... There are a lot of shows that by the time I wrap up, I sort of feel ready to have wrapped up. And this is not one of them. I just feel like there's still so much more to do. There's so much more of her story left. And I can't imagine feeling like we have reached a conclusion by the end of just 4 or 5 more. I have confidence in the writers. And I think that, if I'm not mistaken, were they offered to get more seasons on this show and they declined because they had a predetermined plan of how they wanted to handle it? Because if I'm not mistaken, that's how that went. And I always really admire when people are willing to stick to their plan despite the promise of more profit on the horizon, you know? This was something that also happened with Gravity Falls. Oh, wait. Lauren says 17 episodes in season 5. Oh my God, there's a season 5? I feel like I've done this 8 times. Have I done this before? Been shocked that there was a season 8? I feel like, or season 5. I am... Megan says there's only 4. Okay. Lauren, get out. You've broken my heart. I'm banning you. Get out. I hate you. I'm just kidding. Oh my God, but I got so excited. Oh, well, what can you do? But yeah. Lauren says, bye. Yeah, I feel confident that they know what they're doing and that it is going to feel like we are moving into a good place when we leave. That's really the key for me, is a finale of a show with characters that you've grown to love. You don't want to put a period at the end of the sentence. You want to start a new sentence and then leave while you're still mid-sentence and give the audience the impression that the show is continuing on and that they just haven't gotten to see that season yet, but they've gotten to see the preview kind of thing. You know, I feel like that's always a good feel. And I stand by one of the best finales of any show is the series finale of Parks and Rec, where they do that exact thing. They let you see where characters end up, and they spend a lot of time on everyone. And you just wrap everything with this sincere feeling of satisfaction that is so rare, you know? So we'll see. I mean, the thing about Rebecca too is that anything that feels too optimistic, it's not going to feel genuine. So I suspect that when we leave off with her, it might not be all, you know, rainbows and sunshine, because people just don't do a full forward progression when they're dealing with mental illness. It's just not how it works. You take a few steps forward and then you get a setback and you feel like you've just not learned anything. You feel like you're never going to get better, that things haven't like changed for you at all. And it all sort of comes crashing back. And then you recover and you realize, no, that went a little better than my breakdowns in the past have gone, actually. It wasn't like I'm invincible to them, but it went a little better. And you just hope that going forward, you learn to bear it, more than you had been able to because you didn't have the tools in the past. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a little bit of a backslide for her. It's like a question how much of that they can do when there are so few episodes remaining. But yeah, so let's see. Lauren says, just for info or try to redeem myself, season 4 is 17 episodes and the 18th is a concert of songs from the show. Oh, huh. Okay. Interesting. So I wonder if that'll even be commissioned, if people want me to like cover that or not. I mean, I guess I could watch it and then also just do kind of a wrap-up episode. But yeah, there's the final few haven't been commissioned yet, so I guess we'll see what people want to do. All right, so let's get talking about this episode. You guys, this is, okay, so first of all, let's just deal with Rebecca and what goes on with her and Daryl. Here's the thing. This is something that's really difficult for me to relate to. It's not impossible, but it's difficult. The concept of needing a friend to go with you to something that you want to do. There are things that I feel that way about. For example, I don't think that I would go to like the Dallas Arboretum, which is one of my favorite like things to do before the pandemic, without a friend. I mean, if I lived closer, I might be willing to like go and spend a day just reading, but I don't think so. I think I like to go with someone. I wouldn't go to a concert by myself, likely, depending on the concert. If it was something that was sort of like a classical sit down sort of concert, then I might go by myself, but probably not. When it comes to food, I don't give a fuck if there's somebody there. I truly don't. And I know that I am kind of in the minority on this because it is a frequent topic of conversation in a variety of groups that I'm in, where there are a lot of single people and they all sort of struggle with going out to eat by themselves. And I have just really never cared. It has never been something that like I felt self-conscious about. It has never been something that it occurred to me other people would feel self-conscious about either. Like, I remember watching a show where some people were looking over at a man who was eating by himself and talking over whether they should go and speak to him because they felt bad because he was by himself and he must be really lonely, or how sad it was. And I was watching the episode like, leave him the fuck alone. He's probably having the best time. Before cell phones were even a thing, I took myself out to an expensive dinner to celebrate getting a new job. This was back when I was probably like 20 or 21. And I was alone. I brought magazines. I read and ate a like $115 meal, bottle of wine, dessert, the whole thing, alone, dressed up, alone. And I had a ball and I just had such a good time. It was a wonderful night. I still remember it. I don't need someone to come with me for something like that. In fact, sometimes I enjoy it more by myself because I just get to just completely do whatever I feel like doing. And so this episode, the struggle that Rebecca has with trying to find somebody to go with her to this barbecue place, I just was like, girl, go by yourself. Learning how to enjoy things alone is a critical skill, I think, in being a happy person. because you don't depend on everyone else to have a good time. It's just not always going to work out. Everybody has a life and they have their own priorities and their own responsibilities and obligations. And if they can come with you, like, by all means, but don't just not do something because nobody's able to go with you and do it too. Like I said, there are some exceptions, the things that I know I wouldn't do if I had nobody to do it with. But that's a pretty short list, to be honest. And I just wanted so much for that to be what happened for her this episode, that she, like, learned to enjoy time by herself. That said, not terribly interesting to watch as a TV viewer, her all alone. You know, it's not ripe for comedy if she goes out and actually enjoys herself by herself. Comedy is her going out alone and a bunch of, like, things happening, or her being embarrassed, or, you know, whatever, things going wrong. So I understand why they had it happen this way, for the sake of the script and needing there to be dialogue and a back and forth. Also, thematically, throughout the episode, we see everybody on a road trip. So we have Heather, who she is heading down to one of the other home base locations, and she comes across Nathaniel stranded on the side of the road because his electric car ran out of juice. And then we have Paula, who has to get a new desk for her office. I'm such a Paula, you guys. And she hires somebody from this service, Bros with Trucks, to go pick the desk up for her. And it's Josh. So in that sense as well, thematically, it had to happen this way. Nevertheless, I feel a way about it. I'm just saying. Okay, so she is looking for somebody to go with her. Heather has work. Valencia's moved away. Paula is studying. This is part of what kills me, is like, if she had called up Paula and asked her to go for barbecue, probably Paula would have gone with her. You know, like, we know how much she wanted to procrastinate. That was her thing for the day. And I bet she would have, like, jumped at that opportunity. They could even have made it a whole thing where they go pick up the desk and they go out and eat. But And I will admit, too, most of this episode, I was waiting for an overlap between all of their journeys. I thought that they would run into each other at the truck stop when when Rebecca and Daryl pull over. I thought that they were going to run into other, you know, probably because I don't really know California geography too well. Maybe if you look on a map at where everybody says they were going, there's no way they would have run into each other. But I just sort of assumed that that was going to be what happened. Everybody sort of ran into each other. Rowan says, I often work out of town, so I learned early to enjoy eating by myself. I get to focus on the food. Because I have ADHD, if I eat with someone, no matter how good the food is, I will barely notice it. That's another thing, Rowan, that I think is part of why I have enjoyed going out to eat by myself, is that I get to, like, fully engage on the food without conversation. I think you're right. I love chatting, and that's part of the problem. I will chat and I will forget to eat before my food gets cold. And I love food, you guys, but I like talking more. That's how much I love talking. And oftentimes I will tell a story, or the other person will tell a story, and one of us will just, like, not eat anything until finally, you know, 40 minutes has passed. We're finished with our story, but also our linguine is ice cold. So yeah, I feel you on that. I think also being an only child might be a factor in this. I grew up doing a lot by myself, and so it has never felt strange to me at all. And I didn't have, like, a lot of close friends growing up. I went and just kind of forged my path in places where I didn't know anyone. So I had to do things by myself just by default. And I just grew very used to that, and it just never felt weird to me. Anyway, so finally, she decides that she's going to use the work text chain to ask if anybody wants to go with her. And as she's saying this, I'm like, well, Daryl will go, but you just said that you don't want to have an emotional conversation. I don't know if he's your guy for that. And then both Valencia and Heather are like, is Daryl on that text chain? 'Cause you're not getting out of that now. And sure enough, Rebecca's like trying to reassure them. There will be so many people, Daryl won't be an issue. And I'm like, nobody's replying to this girl. Daryl's the only one that's coming with you. And that is exactly what happens. So she tries to be as upfront as she can right out of the gate when she meets Daryl and says, look, I really want to keep today light and breezy. I've been doing a lot of like internal work with my therapy groups, one-on-one sessions, and I am just sort of tired of having these heavy conversations. So I would like to just go out and have a fun day. And Daryl is just not good at that kind of communication. There's a really funny bit where she's talking to AJ. It's AJ, right? The person who works for her at her pretzel place. And AJ says that when they were talking to Daryl, that they had only been talking for like 20 minutes and then they wound up crying their eyes out over their mothers. Something like that. So the thing here is that, look, on the way down, Daryl keeps on pushing her about emotional issues, how she's feeling about her friends having moved away. What was her childhood like? Tell me your saddest childhood memory. It's all exaggerated, of course, but nevertheless, it's still just like, dude, what are you doing? And they finally get to, she like kind of snaps at him a little bit. He pipes down. We get that song about being stuck in a car with somebody you don't want to be stuck in a car with, which is weirdly, it's one of those songs that I feel like it started off well. And I know the point is that it sort of winds down badly, but it was not fun. I did not like this song. It's not frequent that happens, but I actively tuned it out because I was bored. And like came back to it and I couldn't believe the song was still going. I was just like, are we doing this really? And again, I know that's the point, but you know, so they get to the restaurant, the barbecue place, and they're just trying to get a table. And Daryl is talking about how like, this is a very special day, 2 friends, and Rebecca tries to be like, it's not, it's just a fun day. And then he's like, well, she's having a hard time. She has a disorder. And she is like, dude, can you fucking not? And the hostess goes away tactfully. And she kind of like goes off and eventually says, you know what? It's not your fault. It's just, you are everything I didn't want today. Now, look, that's a really harsh sentence. You are everything I didn't want today sucks. And she should not have said that. However, I really felt like Daryl was being super disrespectful of her boundaries in a variety of ways. And I felt a way about the fact that it was Rebecca who wound up apologizing. She said something in a way that was hurtful, inadvertently, while trying to explain why what they were doing wasn't working for her. It was not like because he said something like, I really feel like you don't like me. And it just turned the whole thing around into whether she likes him. And that's not what this is supposed to be about. The whole thing is supposed to be that she told you what she needed from the day. She's been very upfront with you the whole time about what she needs. And not only were you just not like hearing her, but then you start to tell a complete stranger about her mental health issue. You're just disclosing mental illness of a close friend who's standing right there to someone you met 30 seconds ago, which is super not okay at all. And I really didn't like how her rightful anger got turned into, you hurt my feelings, you're mean to me. Look, Daryl, maybe you should be a little bit more of an adult in these interactions and people wouldn't feel the need to completely snap at you. Because most people wouldn't just blurt out, my friend has a disorder, when you're just trying to get a fucking table. That's a weird thing to do. It's not respectful, and it's not kind on your behalf either. You may intend it kindly because you're trying to, like, I don't know what. But even so, when somebody has explicitly asked you to behave a certain way for their sake, and you refuse to do that over and over again, despite correction, that's unkind also. And it just really frustrated me, the way that this was handled, that it just turned around into the, and, granted, when she comes outside, eventually they get to her just being like, I am just exhausted and I don't want to do this anymore. And he finally understood, and they were able to have their chill day. But first it had to be a whole thing about him. And she was the one who, like, had to apologize. And I just really, this show doesn't, like, go, like, hit wrong for me often. If it does, they tend to correct it. They tend to sort of address it eventually. I don't think this is going to be addressed again. I feel like this was it for this storyline. And it just bothered me because it's just another moment of, like, you trying to tell somebody what you need and them making it about themselves when that was not what the point was supposed to be. So I just wanted to get that out there because it really bothered me. Daryl is somebody that I can understand him being too much. I can understand him being somebody that you don't want to get together with all the time because they go too far with things like this. And that just being the nature of your friendship. Like, there are people like that, I think, that we all know. If there's somebody that we want tea and sympathy, they're the one that we go to. But if we want to just text somebody a meme real quick without getting into a conversation, they are not the one we're going to do that with, because when we do, it begins an hour-long text conversation, or they just, like, call you instead of even texting back. We have people in our lives like that. We understand their limitations and we know that about them, and so we choose to interact with them on the basis that we, have sort of assigned them in our minds the type of friend they are. One could say Rebecca should have realized that Daryl wasn't that kind of friend and not gone with him if that wasn't what she wanted. But she tries so hard to, like, establish her boundaries repeatedly. And I don't feel the fault was with her at all. She keeps having to just look at him because he's just going down, like, practically asking exact questions a therapist would ask a couple of times. And, there's a tendency to sort of treat Daryl as a character, as if he's, like, 12 years old. I'm sorry. The man's like 50. He should know by now. Like, he should be able to see what he is doing. There should be some self-awareness in him. And I know that part of the point was meant to be, like, I think anyway, let's deal with whether or not we even like Daryl, because he can be sort of thrown to the side and then brought back when we want, like, a fuzzy, sweet, warm moment. And then episode to episode, he doesn't appear that often. So I think that they were kind of trying to address that. But I don't want it to come at the expense of her storyline, which I thought was very fair and understandable. And I felt like Rebecca handled herself super well right up until the point where he told somebody she has a disorder, and then she, like, went off and said, you are what I didn't want today. I'm not, like, it was not a kind thing to say, but I'm not that mad at her for it, because he crossed a major line, in my opinion. So I don't know if I'm alone in that, but it did not hit right with me. That said, once they finally do get on the same page, seeing them, like, complete a maze on their tablecloth with crayons was fun. And then on the way back, they decide that they're going to stop at a truck stop because they are still covered in barbecue sauce. He's going to he changes his clothes because his outfit was just, like, demolished. And they, like, are hanging out in the parking lot. And he comes out and he has shaved his mustache off. because there was, as he says, like the molasses wasn't moving, all the barbecue sauce in there. It was just impossible to get out. A weird moment. I'm wondering if like the actor had to shave it off for something else and they just decided to write it into the script. I don't know if it was like supposed to be sort of a symbolic thing, but it was sort of odd to me that he chose to do it at a truck stop there. Hot water dissolves sugar really easily. There's just no reason why he couldn't have washed it out. Whatever. And then he and Rebecca have this moment where it looks like they're going to kiss. And for a second, I was like, are we doing this? And then they stop. But I appreciated that they actually have a conversation about it afterwards. She says to him once they get to the house, I just don't see a romantic thing between us. And he's like, oh my God, me neither, thank God. And then she says, I will say, I find it really encouraging that I was attracted to you because I tend to only be attracted to withholding, distant, unavailable, jerky men. And I was attracted to somebody nice, which maybe that does mean that I am ready to be out there and dating again. So she's going to start dating. And I'm like, maybe that is okay. Like, I feel like the fact that she was willing to break up with Nathaniel is a major step for her in terms of her having a healthy idea of relationships all of a sudden. I say all of a sudden, really not like she worked hard on it, but it feels all of a sudden a little bit to me, you know? So I guess we'll see if like the next episode we have her dating. But I understand her feeling on that. Like the idea of repeating patterns for so long that when you first see yourself breaking out of that, it's a real moment for you. So, all right, let's talk about Paula. Look, guys, I'm going to be honest with y'all. I relate to Paula way too much, considering that I'm not a mom. Me and Paula are just like, we could really be friends. And I've said that from the beginning. So the whole thing here is that Paula has to study for exams and eventually she's going to have to study for the bar. And she has decided that in order to do that, she has to get the correct desk. And my screensaver keeps starting and it's driving me nuts. What's so relatable here for me is that I am absolutely somebody who wants to get everything in place to a point that's like impossible practically to reach before I start doing the thing. And it's not a great place to live because you rarely actually get to a satisfactory spot where you're like, okay, now I can start. This also, there's a part of this that's like when you're somebody who's a planner, like I am, to a degree, that can be more fun than actually accomplishing the thing. It's figuring out all the bits and pieces to get yourself ready to do the thing. And I have this trait. Anybody who has dated me or been close friends with me will know. I will get interested in something and I will go fucking all out getting all the equipment that I need for this thing before I have actually like gotten really invested in it as an activity. And I will convince myself I'm not invested in the activity yet because I don't have all the stuff. And then once I do get all the stuff, I find out I don't really like the activity that much, actually. I didn't really like it, and I don't know what to do with all this stuff now. That has happened to me a few times. Many times. Now, with Paula, it's a different thing because this is something that she is invested in already. She's going to school. She's doing well. She works at a place where being a lawyer would be advantageous. She's like, it's not really the same. But just this idea of sort of procrastinating by using like these little errands, almost like these side quests, I just really relate to that. And what I'm dealing with right now, so all of you who are following me on the various platforms know I did a GoFundMe a little, 2 weeks ago? And in order to get a standing desk and a treadmill for my office. It was funded in an hour and 45 minutes because y'all are bonkers. And I finally, yesterday, got everything completely set up. You guys don't even know what it was like in this house the week before with trying to, oh my God. But it's finally set up. It's fucking great. I've been using it every day. I love it. But in the meantime, I was hardly doing any physical exercise because I was just so overwhelmed by everything going on with all the boxes and taking the old desk apart and selling stuff and oh man. So Paula has convinced herself that she needs this desk because she doesn't actually want to study because she has a fear of success. A fear of success is such a weird thing, isn't it? It just feels so counterintuitive. Why do you not want the thing that you definitely do want? What's the deal? With Paula, it really feels like there's a leftover sort of baggage from the fact that nobody else thought that she could make it. So, because she says this specifically to her husband, that everybody thought that I was just going to be a baby factory. And then there's also the idea of what if I make it and I'm still not happy? Or what if I make it and something goes wrong and it gets taken away from me? This is something that I've talked about when I finally started to make enough money with Patreon that I was feeling more secure. Especially when I decided that I was going to have a bigger wedding and begin putting money aside for that. I really began to have this fear that, okay, I'm going to get used to this success. I'm going to feel stable and be have gotten myself in a position where I owe money or I'm depending on getting the money that I think I'm getting, and something is going to happen and it's going to be taken away. I'll lose a bunch of patrons overnight. Something will happen to Patreon and it'll shut down. I will lose my ability to podcast for some reason and everybody will abandon me. All of these things that it was almost like the success wasn't the thing I was afraid of. It was getting used to the success that I was afraid of. Does that make sense? I don't know if that's part of it with Paula. I know that fear of success takes on a lot of different forms for different people. But I think for her, there might be a sense of her identity. She sort of thought she knew who she was. And now that she is succeeding in doing something that's so outside of what anyone else expected, but also maybe what she expected, that she isn't really sure how to cope with that. And that's sort of interesting because, we have an idea of who we are. We have our sense of identity. And as much as it may be have a lot of really negative traits, it's familiar and it's what we know. So we think. So we cling to the thing because it's what we think we know. And we claim to want something different. But that different thing is not the cozy old bathrobe. It's a brand new $500 silk robe. And it's lovely. But it's not cozy. It's not the thing that we've had. And so it feels incredibly counterintuitive, but we go for the old ratty shitty robe that we keep saying we really need to replace. Ooh, look at it. It's gross. I hate this robe. And yet we're given this other thing and we don't take it. It's so weird, and I fucking understand her. So she, calls the service. She gets offered to get the folding table out of the garage by her husband. And she's like, ew, folding table. No, what? No. So she calls the service and this driver turns up and it's Josh and she is horrified. And she says something about how she was expecting to be able to spend a couple hours with a stranger, which is so funny because honestly, there's so much going on there. But for me, the major part of that is the giant question mark in reaction to wanting to spend hours in a car with a stranger. I literally can't think of anything worse, like, as somebody who has anxiety. You guys, have you ever, like, gotten, like, broken down on the side of the road and a tow truck had to come and get your car and you had to climb into the cab of the tow truck and ride with this fucking random dude and feel like you're, like, in his space a little bit for an indeterminate amount of time until you get wherever and they drop your car off? I have been in that position like twice in my life, and it was the actual worst. It sucked. And the idea that she's hoping that she will, like, be with somebody she doesn't know. And granted, she's got, like, this whole background thing about him. So she thinks, to indicate whether or not she'd have a good time talking to him. Nevertheless, it's a stranger. I just would hate it. Oh my God, no. It just, look, I have people in my life that I love and know well that I don't want to talk to. Don't even come at me, somebody that I don't even know. You know what? So that was baffling to me. And I'm wondering if that's part of the identity thing, is that she was hoping to spend time with somebody who doesn't know her as Paula, who has no idea who she is and her, like, baggage about herself. I don't know. But they arrive at this woman's house, and I can't remember her name, but she's selling the desk. And Paula, it's clear when Josh is like, all right, let's pick it up and head out of here. Paula's like, but wait, what? Well, it's only going to be like 90 minutes before this whole chore is completed. We should definitely see what this lady has, because she's got tons of collectibles. And this lady is a weirdo. She says something about how she has a pet leopard and some other animal. Can't remember. And then when they start walking around, she's got all kinds of, like, what is it when animals are stuffed and mounted? And she's got, like, also, like, porcelain cats and whatnot. A ton of them. Like, her house is absolutely cluttered with them. I love at one point, she's talking about this, like, stuffed squirrel that doesn't have an eye. And she says something about how her husband hit it. I don't remember what he hit it with, but its eye bounced out. And then she's like, I think it's here in the candy jar. She kept the eye. Oh my God. And Paul, like, this is a house of horrors, but the fact that Paula is eager to spend time here just indicates how intensely she is willing to commit to not doing what she's supposed to be doing today. So on the way down, Josh is talking about himself nonstop. And this is a really interesting thing here. So first of all, we have the great moment where Josh is like, oh, I forgot. You're not in therapy. You don't get the lingo. And I love that sort of, like, smug, like, oh, you're not part of the club kind of thing yet. Also, I really like the fact that Paul is almost in the same place as Rebecca, where she doesn't want to talk about her life and what's going on with her in a very personal way. So the fact that he is talking about deeply personal, intense, like, you know, life stuff is the opposite of what she was looking for. And it also points out to her, probably, it's like, I'm completely willing to take it at face value that it's just, oh my God, he's done nothing but talk about himself this entire time. I'm so sick of him. Sure. But also, when you are trying to not look at your own shit and you are hanging out with somebody who is doing nothing but looking at their own shit, whether or not they're overestimating the importance of certain events in their lives or not, it makes you uncomfortable because you're trying to pretend that not doing that is fine and no big deal and healthy. And here is a person who isn't willing to live like that. So, you know, as somebody, I have been here as, like, the Josh, where I was engaged to somebody who was an alcoholic, and I was coming to terms with the fact that I had an overeating disorder, undereating too. It was just an eating disorder, and it manifested sometimes as overeating sometimes as starving. And the person that I was with at the time did not like the fact that I was going to 12-step programs about eating disorder recovery, because they knew they had their own issue. And the more I learned about my issue, the more I began to see his issue. And he just wanted to keep living the way he was living and not really face the fact that he had a problem, a really serious problem, which I failed to realize until I started to go to this. And he actively began to discourage me from going to the meetings. He didn't want me talking about any of it to him. Generally, just like, it was all of the signals were constantly being put out there that he didn't want to hear about it. And I just didn't really understand immediately. It was a little while before I realized, oh, I keep thinking that he's like upset with me for some reason for doing this because he doesn't believe in it. But now I'm realizing he does believe in it and he just doesn't want to think about it. So I think that might be some of what's going on here with Paula. So she's chatting with this woman about her porcelain cats. And Josh comes in and he sort of snaps at Paula and says, I can't, first of all, I have a gig tonight and I can't keep enabling you on your procrastination because of your fear of success. And Paula just sort of starts, and even Josh looks surprised and says, did I get it right? And she's like, I think you did. Yeah. And eventually she goes home with him, and there's a moment where they pretend like they're going to kiss, and it turns out that she's reaching over around him for a listing of apartments and tells him, you really need to get out of Hector's mom's house. And he says something about how oh, right, moving on with my life, going forward and forging my own path. And she's like, no, just because it's weird and creepy. And he's like, everybody keeps saying that to me, which honestly, there's a part of me that's like, look, if it's working for him, I don't really care. There's a part of me that understands wanting to push somebody to be on their own. But also there's another part of me that's practically speaking, that's not really an option for everybody. It's just not. And the kinds of jobs that Josh seems qualified for, I wouldn't be surprised if he couldn't make the money to have his own place. And if it's working for both of them, I just don't really see the problem. It's weird. Don't get me wrong. But so people are weird. People do weird shit. Who cares? Let them be weird. It's fine. Whatever. Maybe that would be an obstacle for him when he decided to start dating again and women were like, you're living with who? Well, that's his thing to cope with, and he gets to decide whether or not that trade-off is worth it to him. But, it's fine. So, all right, last one is Heather and Nathaniel. What I love about this is that I really didn't like Nathaniel when he showed up, which you're not supposed to. Then they decide to make him into a love interest for Rebecca, which was weird, and didn't feel it felt like we were suddenly supposed to forget how much of a shithead he was. Then we sort of acknowledge what a shithead he was, but he's still a new regular, and I was like, what are we doing? And then once they break up, it seems like gloves are off again, and we're just going to have shitty Nathaniel back. And part of me was fine with that. I am all about having your characters have growth, but I'm also fine with the concept of some characters having more growth than others. Mild spoilers for Schitt's Creek, but that whole family, there are 4 of them, and there's one character out of the 4 that really at the end of the series feels like they are in almost the exact same place that they were when they moved to Schitt's Creek. Everybody else has had these big journeys and has discovered that they have new priorities and goals. And then there's one who's the same. They want the same things that they used to want. They do the same things that they've always done. And it kind of works. Everybody having these huge arcs that put them in a completely different place than they were, it's not realistic, honestly. So having one person who sort of doesn't actually grow, that's fine with me. And I sort of expected that to be where Nathaniel fell. That he was going to be somebody that, like, he was given the opportunity to grow. He was surrounded by other people who were growing and who were attempting to, like, get him to see himself more clearly. And he just chose not to engage on any of that and to keep being who he's always been. And that I would not have had a problem with it at all. Instead, what we get is, first of all, he gets visited by the guy from Rebecca's group therapy, who I've forgotten his name again. But this dude apparently wants to get to know Nathaniel better. Nathaniel hasn't got any interest in that. And his, like, premise for coming to see Nathaniel at all is to bring him his mail. And Nathaniel opens this, like, envelope and kind of freaks out, and he gets up and leaves immediately. And it's, like, really rude and strange. So Heather, who earlier is, like, sort of getting on him over the fact that he doesn't say please or thank you or anything when she's waiting on him, she's driving to the other home base and sees him at the side of the road and picks him up. And he is a huge douchebag to her over the kind of car that she's driving and just everything. But really the car is, like, the thing that he keeps sort of circling back around to. And she finally, like, she's asked him what's in the envelope and he won't tell her. And it's not even that she doesn't, as she puts it, I don't care that you won't tell, I don't care what it is, but I don't like that you won't tell me. I'm over here doing you a favor and helping you out. And you're just, like, clinging to this thing and being super weird. Just tell me what it is. So eventually her car breaks down and they get in an argument outside, and she goes to snatch the envelope away from him, and it sort of explodes in this puff of ash. And it turns out that these were the ashes of his au pair, and that she and he were so close that her family sent him some of her ashes to scatter at the beach because they used to spend a ton of time there together. And Heather is startled because the whole thing that they've been, like, in a fight about is how unpleasant he is to everybody, how self-absorbed he is, how, like, completely self-satisfied he is, and that he doesn't have anyone that he, like, is connected to because of the fact that he's a total dickhead all the time. And then all of a sudden here he is being sort of emotionally vulnerable, and he begins crying, like, telling her about how much this person meant to him, and that Rebecca was the only other person who loved him the way that his au pair loved him, and they're both gone. And he's really upset. And he says something about how, like, maybe you wouldn't have such trouble making connections with people if you could just, you know, be nicer. To which he's like, do you think I don't know that? But I just don't, like, it doesn't come naturally. I'm going to go to that spot, actually, because most of this I've been able to talk about from memory. But that moment where he's, like, sharing with her the feeling of not knowing how to be nicer, that is, like, one of those things that I actually did kind of relate to. There is when you aren't somebody who does the show of niceness easily, it can feel false to suddenly, you know, it feels like an act, like you're faking it, and you don't want to do that either, you know? You think I don't know that I'm a jerk? I don't want to be that way. When I'm hurt, I clam up and I lash out. This is something that I struggle with. When he says, I don't want to be that way, I felt that. I can be a real asshole, guys. I just can. I can be cruel. I can be, and not like I'm trying to be. That's the worst part. I'm not cruel because I enjoy being cruel. I hate cruelty. But I will say exactly what I think, simply because it's the truth in my head, with no thought as to what it's going to sound like to the person hearing it. The kind of thing that Rebecca said, where you are exactly what I didn't want today, that is exactly what I mean. That sort of shit, where it's, like, incredibly devastating to the person hearing it. But to me, I'm just literally telling them the truth about how what I wanted and that they're not doing it. You know, like to me in the moment, I'm like, I'm just trying to tell you what's going on. And I don't get how it comes across until I see them like just cry, you know, or like look devastated. And I'm really judgmental over every stupid little thing. And I've said this before, that if you think it's bad hearing me be judgmental, imagine what it's like in my fucking head, where I only say 1% of the judgmental things I think. It's exhausting, because that judgment is not reserved for other people. That judgment is also being inflicted inward back onto me. So I am at the mercy of this fucking voice that will not shut up over every little thing. Oh my God, I can't believe that you haven't cleaned those baseboards yet. Oh my God, I can't believe that you look like that in that picture. Oh my God, how long has it been since you washed your sheets? Oh my God, I can't believe that you posted such and such 3 years ago in your memories. Aren't you embarrassed of that? Everything. And it manifests as me also being that way to everyone else. And I try to keep it inside because it's unkind. It doesn't do anything for anyone. It's not productive. It's not helpful. But it's there. And it's taken me a long time to learn to sort of manage it in any way. That's a big part of what happened with my first marriage, was I was not good at learning how to communicate empathetically. I communicated with efficiency and directness in mind, but not compassion. So it was super hurtful, but I was like, well, maybe being hurtful sucks, but it also gets us to the point faster. So I don't know, maybe that's fine. And it just took me so much longer to realize, if you act like that with people, they don't hear you. That's not actually effective. It feels effective on your end because it's exactly saying what you think. But because of how hurtful it is, the other person doesn't actually internalize anything that you said. All they feel is I can't believe she fucking said that to me. So him struggling with just being a jerk and just saying shit and not thinking about how it sounds or even caring how it sounds. That's the other thing, is I have grown so that I give a shit about everybody that I'm speaking to. But it used to be that, well, okay, so I hurt their feelings. I don't know them. Who cares? Whatever. You know? And I think that's how Nathaniel operates. It's just, yeah, but who are you? What? Fuck off. And it's not a good way to be. It's not a good way to live. And when you are somebody who has sort of been spoiled, and I will say, I was spoiled in my way growing up. It's not like we had a ton of money, but I think emotionally I was. You just become the center of your universe, and you're used to everybody else thinking of you as the center of the universe. And it's just well, that's just how it should be. And you have to really work to unlearn that and work to realize that people don't fucking see you that way. And who the fuck are you? You know, you're not special. You've been told your entire life that you are. You're not. I mean, maybe you are, but not that way. Not the way that you get to just treat everybody else like they aren't. So I kind of like this, actually, because like I said, I've been really struggling with whatever they intended with Nathaniel. It was just he sort of spun out, and it felt like they didn't know what to do with him. I think that's exactly true. And he says, when he's weeping, that this is pathetic. And Heather says, Heidi would be proud of you. I mean, I didn't know her, but I'm just inferring a lot from what you said. And Nathaniel says, all she wanted was to get back to the ocean, and I failed her. I failed. And he apologizes to the envelope, and Heather is like, yeah, you did. You kind of did. She's going to try and say, I thought she was saying, you did. You kind of did fail. I thought what she was going to do here was be like, okay, so you failed. That happens. It's fine. You just move on. Because obviously, Nathaniel also struggles with like this perfectionism and overachieving. But instead, she gestures forward and they see this city grate that says no dumping, drains to ocean. And they realize that all of this like ash probably flew down this, or at least a lot of it did. And they stand over it with their like shirts and stuff that still have ash on it and shake it off. And that's about as well as they are going to do. As she puts it, this is a clear health violation. But yeah, this is kind of a sweet moment. And she says, I think you were right about my car. Because he said something earlier about how like you're supposed to be like a regional manager and you're driving around in this like 1996 Hyundai. Girl, get yourself a car, have some self-respect. And that's one of those things that like, I always have a problem anytime that somebody who has money and doesn't know what it's like to not have money tries to be like, they equate any sort of like self-respect or standards with something that requires a bunch of money. But Heather is doing better now, and she probably could afford another car. And she just, it's not a priority for her, and it hasn't mattered to her, you know? So I am curious, though, because, like, she wasn't even paying rent when she lived with Rebecca. And what does Hector do? Can't even remember what he does for a living. I wonder how, like, they must be okay financially. I'm still waiting for the fucking pretzel place to, like, tank. I'm very preoccupied with money, guys, if you can't tell. It's just something that's always been a thing that I needed to worry about, and I can't understand how other people don't have to. But yeah, so the end of the episode is Nathaniel goes to the bar, and he sees the dude again from Rebecca's, like, group therapy group. And he gives the guy like a kiss on the head because he doesn't know how to express affection. And the dude's like, okay, that was weird, but I see what you're doing. And I think that's a good step. And then we have the very last scene, which is Daryl singing a lullaby to the mustache that he has in the baggie that he took from the truck stop. And it's honestly really funny. When he holds up the bag, I was like, oh my God. He looks really weird without his mustache. I don't know if I like it, honestly, because he just, it feels like his lip is just kind of not even there. Just weird. He's got sort of like those dried apple faces, you know, how their lips like sort of curl inward. That's what's happening right there. I'm not sure this is such a good look for him. This is the thing about facial hair, man. It can just give you angles that you don't have. If y'all have seen like men who look hot as balls with a fucking beard because it gives them a jawline, and then they shave their beard off and you're like, oh my God, they're 11 years old. It's just really weird. Owen has that a little bit, and he freely admits it. Like when he shaves his beard off, he's like, not only does he look like a complete stranger, but he looks like he's prepubescent, and I can't even look at him. It's just like, come back to me in 3 days when you start to get some stubble back, because I can't right now. But anyway, yeah, I wonder if this is just the rest of the season, him with no mustache. All right, well, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. Thank you to Megan for commissioning this episode. I appreciate you all. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.